So there is this term in software called API. So let's just have like a brief overview of what this API thing that we see a lot is all about. So first of all, API stands for application programming. Let me um, programming interface. Um, okay, so what is an API? Let's break this down into like two parts, just to understand what we're talking about when we say application and what the programming interface is all about. So I will split this into two like parts to understand. So what is a programming interface? It's important to start, I think, with this one. So programming interface, it's just a fancy word to say that we are doing something with programming commands. So, uh, so this part is all about just programming commands. It's just as simple as opening up your code editor and writing some code. So when we talk about the second part of the API, the programming interface, there's something that involves programming and programming commands. So there's a set of commands that this API provides to you, and you can use these commands to do stuff. So programming interface is just programming commands. So if we want to simplify this, it's just a fancy term for having a set of commands, and we can use them and write programs. So that's the PI part. Now, what is the A part, and how do these like fit together? Now, initially, the application was when this API started. The A was something very very specific. It was like a very specific family of let's say of software programs and applications that we were talking about. Eventually, this thing called the application in API became broader and broader. And instead of just talking about applications, these days, when we're talking about the A part in API, and when we see this API, we're talking about almost everything. Sorry, anything. What do I mean? The API can be the A these days can be, and I will see how we can connect this PI with A is can be anything like a service like Gmail, Excel, or whatever, like Google, Wikipedia. So the things that we can put inside this A, so what this A defines, can be very, very broad, like Gmail, Excel. So we have like services, like online services. We have like applications, like Photoshop, Word, Excel is here because there's also a desktop version. So we have applications. We also have devices. So this say, as you can see, is really broad these days. We have smart TVs, smart TVs. We have refrigerators, literally refrigerators. We have drones. We have I don't know, and we also have like I mean this you can think of this as devices, or let's say or let me put this like hardware like computers, I don't know, some sort of electronics, Arduino, if you're familiar with like the Arduino family of electronics. And we can have things like literally like almost anything like cars, literally like real cars. What else? Uh, I have drones in there. So basically, you know, anything you can think these days that's kind of like a device, an electronic device, fits into this category of application. So the A part of API is no longer restricted to an application that we use on the computer. It's kind of like an old term. It started with just defining applications like programs on our computer, but eventually we got to use this with all sorts of things like TVs, cars, smartphones, whatever. So these days the A is a little bit of, let's put it, A asterisk. It's not just an application. So maybe it's better to think of API instead of application programming interface, because if we use the word application, it doesn't connect to with what this broad term is all about. So we have a lot of things on the left, and we have programming commands on the right. Okay, so how are these connected? And this is a very, very general overview. So let's say we pick Excel. Okay, so Excel, let me go here, is a service that Google provides in order to send emails, to receive emails, and do some other stuff, manage, organize your emails. So when we are talking about a Gmail API, we're talking about the application, the particular application, which is Gmail, which is a service, not strictly an application, but a service. And then on top of the Gmail service or product, we have some commands. So we go to this area. Let me just put a like heading here. And now the API for Gmail provides some commands. This is the programming interface. So send email, get emails, delete email, I don't know, ID, and so forth. So when we're talking about an API, we're talking about some kind of application, which can be anything, like Gmail, and then a set of programming commands on some language. Okay, this is not strictly JavaScript. It can be programming commands on some language, Python, Java, JavaScript, whatever. So we get something that's already running as an application, and then we have the company or uh, the author that maintains this application, providing to us a set of commands in a particular language, programming language, and we can have this programming interface. So we no longer have to use the Gmail as like an application that we open in the browser. We can open up a JavaScript program and run commands like send mail, get mails, and actually get our emails or send some email or delete some emails through our code. So that's basically an API. Now, let me give a few more examples to see how we can have an API for other things. So let's say Photoshop. So for Photoshop, for example, Photoshop is if you don't know, it's an image editing tool. We open up our photographs, our images, and we play around. We make our images black and white. We delete something and stuff like that. So an API for Photoshop would be exactly the same thing and exactly the same concept, a set of commands in some particular language. So we are talking about, I don't know, open image, um, I don't know, paint image, or whatever Photoshop would have, like delete, or let's say resize image, blur image, something like that. So that would be another API. So get the application, which is Photoshop, provide some commands in some programming language, and you get the Photoshop API. Now, there exists a Photoshop API. It of course, doesn't have these commands, neither do like Gmail. It's just I made up some imaginary commands. And let's go to a car. So if the application part is a car, let me go here. We can have some commands and we can use some R code to control a car. Or maybe that would be like, I don't know, it can be a real car. People have done this, or it can be like a radio control card, the toys, the small ones. So we have APIs for both. And then we can have like some commands to control the car, like turn left, accelerate, break, uh, I don't know, like open lights and stuff like that. So once again, on the left part, we have an application which, as you can see, can even contain cars. And then on the right side, we have some programming commands on some language that allows us to control or do things with that a thing in some language. Now, on top of that, and that's where we see like APIs a lot these days, and that's related with the Google Books API that you're going to be working with. We have things like on this list on the right. Let me put another um, box here. So we have things like let's say websites, like I don't know, New York Times. We have like the New York Stock Exchange. We have, I don't know, like a weather site called Daily, I don't know, like a Daily Weather and stuff like that. So we have some websites that we can, let me put this here. So we generally go through the sites and check the news. Let me put some, like, I don't know, Al Jazeera or whatever. Um, and we have these websites, okay? And they provide some kind of information. So we open up the browser and we see the news, the weather, the stock exchange, like the stock prices, and check the weather and so forth. Let me put this here. So this set of websites or web applications also apply as applications. They are also included in this left part. So the A in API also includes websites. So what kind of programming interface they provide? So there are cases where they provide some JavaScript commands or some Python commands or some, I don't know, Java commands to actually let us read the news, get the latest news, get the weather on a specific country or city and so forth. So we actually see some of these websites provide some APIs in some programming language, but we have this kind of like special category in API. So we have this, let me see if this, okay, I'll just copy this one. So we have this subcategory called REST APIs. So there's a specific, let's say, flavor of APIs called REST APIs. And what they do is they're actually a very, very simplified programming interface. So it actually gives us let's say, an easier way to access some data, maybe run some commands, run some things, control some things on the A part, on the application part, but with a much simpler interface. And what they provide is a set of URLs. So let me put this here. So if we have, no, I don't want, okay, this is a little bit buggy. We still have to fix these bugs. Okay, and we have this REST API, let's say, for the daily weather or the New York Stock Exchange. Okay, this REST API is a little bit different than the other APIs that I mentioned, like this JavaScript or Python commands. They provide, the first thing they do is they provide a set of URLs through which we can actually run the commands. So instead of like opening my JavaScript code and writing some commands like get news and stuff like that, I can access some URL and I can say New York Stock Exchange, I don't know, and then I would say slash API stocks. So I will put this here just to make a little bit more sense. So instead of programming commands, strict programming commands, they provide a set of URLs that look a little bit like this. API, I don't know, Apple, or stock equals Apple. or nice.com API stocks from, I don't know, 1999. So they give us a way to, oops, so they give us the supply a way to get some information, maybe to run some commands, to do something with this website, but not in a programming language. They're just providing URLs. So if I use that URL in my browser, I can actually do something with that application. I can actually get some information, and I can even change some information. So these URLs are not only commands that I can open up in my browser and get back some results. In some occasions, I can also change things on the website, if of course that API allows me to do that. For example, if I have a website that is kind of like allows me like to write my blog, like Medium or Blogspot, I can use this URL along with some data, uh, and I can actually write some things on my blog. So I can use this REST API with a simple URL that would look something, let's say, like this. So Medium, sorry. So the REST API would look like Medium API new post equals I don't know. Intro to APIs and content equals, you know, blah, blah, blah. So we can pass some information either through the URL or through a post body when we're making like an HTTP request. So I can use an API by crafting a special URL, open it up in the browser, or even run it through some code, some programming language, and this URL will actually create a blog on some server or on some website. So the REST API has this different syntax. It provides a set of URLs, so we can actually interact and control some service or some application through URLs, and it has like almost the same effect. We can control things, we can get data, we can update data on some service or web server, but it provides this friendlier like way to interact with this application through URLs. I will show you like a couple of REST APIs just to get an idea. So let me go to what is it? REST countries. So it's a REST API for getting REST countries. Let me see what the URL is. Okay. So this is a REST API. There's a service that provides information about countries around the world, and it provides an API, and that is a REST or a RESTful API. Sometimes you will see the term REST or RESTful. It's roughly the same thing. So they provide a RESTful API, which means a set of URLs to actually do something with this country service. So if I go to, let me check for a country, solid name, let's go to here. So the commands, the programming interface that the service provides is not in the form of a JavaScript command, it's just a URL. And they say that if you use this URL and replace the name here with your country name, you will see your data. So this is something like a requesting some data. We're not writing something. So let me try Greece. I will copy this and I will replace Deutschland with Greece. So if I open this in my browser and I replace Deutschland with Greece, okay, this is what I get back is a special format called JSON. At this point, it might not look. Let me just grab it and see whether I can use a JSON viewer just to see the data. JSON viewer online, just to see this data. I will paste it here and okay. And what do I do next? Viewer. Okay. Let me just try and maybe I have a. Um, okay. Let me try this one. Should I? Okay. Okay. We have a better view. So the JSON format, this is there are no indentation, no new lines here. Sorry for the ads. And what we get is back this JSON structure is a special format that we can also work with in JavaScript, and it contains like several properties and information about the requested country. So we see, for example, the three-letter code for Greece, which is GRE. We see like the name, the official name. We see the native name in Greek. We see the currencies, we see the capital, we see like the languages that are spoken in Greece, we see the population, the area. So this REST API is a service that gives provides information about countries. The PI part, the programming interface, is just a set of URLs that we can either use in the browser and then get back some specific information, or we can get these URLs and we can use them within JavaScript or some other programming language. Almost all programming languages these days can actually make requests to a URL and get back this data. So we can also implement this in JavaScript. We use a command called fetch in JavaScript, and we can supply a URL, get back the results, and do something with that data. This particular service only allows us to get data, to read data from the service. They do not allow us to write something to the service, to like upload something or change something. It's a kind of like read-only API. But there are other services that allows us to actually use a URL, and through that URL run some command on some server and do some things like create a blog post or update our schedule or whatever. So on the let's say on the New York, let's say stock exchange. So we have nice.com API get latest stocks, and we just have like a URL. So the programming interface, the PI part, also turns out to be something a little bit slightly different than the programming interface. It's actually a set of URLs. But most of the times when we talk about APIs, we're talking in the broad sense about this thing, applications that can be almost anything these days, and a programming interface that can either be programming commands or URLs. And maybe there are other like styles of programming interface. So as you can see, the API started from a strict application and a strict programming language to something that's a little bit more, let's say, general and combines these REST APIs and this hardware and these devices. And this is what an API is in programming, or in software and computers in general. So I want to show you that I can install a Chrome extension that will allow me to see this JSON data in a much nicer view. So I will search for Chrome JSON formatter, and I will share the link. So this JSON formatter, if I add it here on my Chrome profile, okay. So I have this JSON formatter extension, and now if I go here and what other country, let's say Ukraine. So if I now use the RESTful API, the URL for getting a country name, and I'm now using the extension, you will see I get another data, JSON data, but this now it's formatted. This is what I get back from the server, like a plain text JSON file that is very, very hard to read. But if I use this extension, you will see that this is nicely organized in, you see the name, the official name. We have where is the capital, Kiev. We have the spellings, the region, the population. We have quite a lot of languages here. Oh, this is the name of the country in different languages. We have like the borders, which countries are around the country, the area. So it's actually a pretty helpful like service. We can sometimes hear the term like JSON API. So when there's an API that returns back some JSON, we usually say JSON API. Okay, New York Stock Exchange JSON API, the weather JSON API, or so we Google for JSON something API. I want to get the latest movies, so I search for movies JSON API. Let's just do this quickly. JSON movies API, and I get some, here's an API that returns back JSON of movies. Um, Now, in some cases, I will try this quickly, but I don't think it will work. And I will mention something that's important. So I get a JSON response. So you can see this service actually works. I get this URL, I put it on my browser, and I get a JSON response. But this JSON response says there's an error, success false. So it's not a successful, let's say, result because there is an invalid API key. So there are two broad categories of APIs. The free APIs, which you can access, they're publicly available for free, so you can access them and get data, just like the REST countries, for free. And there are some APIs that require that you open up either a free or paid account. They give you an API key, your unique key, and then you use that key to connect to the service and get back the some results or some data. They do this to control like how many users are using their API and maybe limit the times that you can access that API per day, per hour, and so forth. So they're like the free open APIs that don't require an API key, and there are also these APIs that require an API key that you have to get from them and then provide it in your requests. Some of them are free; you can just get an API key for free, and some of them are paid, so you have to pay some amount to use their API and, of course, get an API key. So that's for the REST APIs and APIs in general. I hope you learned something useful.